We all know Durga as the fierce goddess slaying the buffalo demon Mahishasur as Mahishasuramardini. But did you know that many of the key rituals of Durga Puja have agrarian origins and deep associations with nature, especially the season autumn? In this episode of the Anti-Library podcast, we will unpack some rituals and scriptural details of Durga Puja. Stay with us and please subscribe to our channel. For many Indians, especially Bengalis, Durga Puja and autumn are often synonymous. The legendary radio program written by Bani Kumar, titled Mahishasur Mardini, starts by evoking the soft autumnal morning with the booming voice of Birendra Krishna Bhadra. আশ্বিনের শারদ প্রাতে বেজে উঠেছে আলোক মঞ্জির. The anklets of light in the autumn morning brings the message of the goddess's arrival. Perhaps the oldest textual evidence of Durga Puja as an autumnal festival is in the Devi Mahatmya section of the Markandeya Purana, written in the 6th century, where King Surat and his merchant friend Samadhi are encouraged by the goddess to worship her for blessings, specifically agricultural prosperity. If we go to the primary text, Devi Mahatma, we see the goddess exhorting her devotees about the benefits of worshipping her during autumn. And I quote, Sarat Kale Mahapuja Kriyate Yacha Varsiki Tashyam Mamaitan Mahatmya Srutva Bhakti Samannita, which translates as at the great annual worship, which is performed in the autumn season, those who hear this poem of my glory are filled with devotion. As she calls her annual autumnal worship a Mahapuja or a grand worship, it becomes clear that the autumnal worship of the goddess Durga was already a practice before it became associated with the popular narrative of Okal Bodhon or untimely invocation, where Ramchandra is supposed to have initiated the autumnal worship of the Devi. The worship of the Devi or Shakti goes as far back as the Rig Vedas, as the Devi Shuktam, literally the hymn of the goddess, and the Ratri Suktam, literally the hymn of the night, both occurring in the 10th mandala of the Rig Veda, attest. The autumnal Durga Puja as Okal Bodhon or untimely invocation is attributed to her worship by Ram. Although this story does not appear in the original Sanskrit Ramayana of Valmiki and has likely originated from the Bhagavat Purana, written between the 8th and 10th centuries. It was popularized by Krittivasi Ramayan, which says that Ram, and I quote, Okale Shorote Koilo Chondir Bodhon, unquote, or invoked Chondi during the untimely autumn. In the Ratri Suktam, the goddess Ratri is both associated with the nurturing and rejuvenating powers of the night, where all beings are united in rest, and which we only fear due to ignorance, while her sister, Usha or Dawn, is associated with regeneration and reawakening. A lot of the Agamoni songs that announce the arrival of the goddess Durga focus on light, such as the beloved songs Bajlo Tomar Alor Benu and Ogo Amar Agamoni Alo, both part of Mahishasur Mardini. This light comes after darkness, when the autumn storms wipe out the light, but are not set against the darkness. And I quote, এই শরতেরও ঝঞ্ঝা বাতে নিশারও শেষে রুদ্র মাতে নিবল আমারও পথের বাতি নিবল প্রাণেরও আলো Ogo Amar Agamoni Alo, and so on. I find the Devi Shuktam to be equally remarkable. The hymn of the Devi is remarkable for a number of reasons. It's addressed in the first person rather than third person, which is the case with most Vedic hymns. It is composed by Rishika Bagamrini, a female sage, and it introduces the notion of the divine feminine as the all-pervasive immanent creative force, becoming one of the key bases of Shaktism. It also introduces the notion of Advaita, as all the principal male Vedic deities such as Vasu, Soma, Mitra, Varuna, Rudra, and the Adityas are subordinated to the goddess. And this announcement of monotheism at the heart of the apparently polytheistic Hinduism, or what later comes to be known as the Advaita Vedanta, happens at least 2000 years before Adi Shankar and 1000 years before the major Upanishads. A lot of us again know this hymn from the radio program Mahishasur Mardini, which goes Aham Rudre Vir Vasubhis Charami Aham, and so on. The great Mimamsaka scholar Shayon or Shayonacharya, in his commentary on the Rig Veda, noted that by uttering the Devi Shuktam, Rishika Bak becomes a Brahma Vidushi, a scholar who has realized the Brahman, as the hymn in the first person becomes a moment of dissolution of her individuality, her ego, if you like, in her identification with the Paramatman, which is none other than Devi. In Devi Shuktam of the Rig Veda, the goddess announces herself as the sovereign of the universe, one who bends the bow of Rudra as the ocean of consciousness, and so on. She proclaims that she fights against hostile men and demons. Her stature as the warrior goddess would grow across later texts. For example, the Devi Purana places Navaratri in a broader mythic context, in which the puja to the goddess not only gave Ram his victory over Ravana, but was also enacted by other deities, ensuring victories for Indra over the demon Vritra, Shiva over Tripura, and Vishnu over Madhu, and so on. So it would be highly presumptuous to think that the male deities armed and enabled the goddess Durga in slaying Mahishasura, as the television musical suggests. Rather, she embodies the collective energy or Shakti of the gods, which are symbolized by various weapons. I would urge everyone to listen to the lecture by Swami Sarvapriyananda of the Vedanta Society of New York about the hymn, the link to which is given in the description. The story of the Okal Bodhon gets reenacted when, on the evening of the sixth day of the Shukla Paksha, or the waxing moon of the month Aswin, on Mahashashti, the priest awakens the goddess Durga under a bilva or wood apple tree and puts a pot of water or ghot and ties together a group of 9 plants on Navapatrika. The Navapatrika is popularly called the Kolabo or banana plant wife of Ganesha. However, these plants are actually associated with 9 forms of Durga herself. These plants are Kadali, banana, Kachi Colocasia or Kochu, Haridra, turmeric, Jayanti, nutmeg, Bilva or wood apple, Dadimba, pomegranate, Ashoka, Mana, Aram or Mankochu, and Dhanna, rice. These plants are tied together with twigs of white Aparajita plants and 9 strands of yellow thread. These 9 plants symbolically represent 9 aspects of the goddess. The banana representing goddess Brahmani, the colocasia goddess Kalika, the turmeric goddess Uma, the nutmeg goddess Kartiki, the wood apple goddess Shiva, the pomegranate goddess Raktadantika, the Ashoka plant goddess Shokaharita, the aram plant goddess Chamunda, and the rice plant goddess Lakshmi. These Navapatrika and the Ghata remain far more important in Durga Puja rituals than her clay murti or image. Actually, the humanized form of the goddess Durga likely became popular around the late 18th century when wealthy Bengali zamindars, the landowners, who were beneficiaries of the permanent settlement of the East India Company, started organizing lavish Durga Pujas. So, as counterintuitive as it might appear, most so-called Bonedi Badi pujas are not really as ancient. Older texts, such as the 12th century Ramcharitam by Shandhakar Nundi and the 15th century Bisu Yamala, suggest that Durga was worshipped grihe grihe in every household, in ghat and pot, with more humble offerings. The 9 forms of Durga symbolized in the Navapatrika do not fully correspond with the Navadurga, namely Shailaputri, Brahmacharini, Chandraghanta, Kushmanda, Skandamata, Katyayani, Kalaratri, Mahagauri, and Siddhidatri, who are worshipped during the festival of Navaratri, literally 9 nights of the goddess in most parts of India. The second remarkable aspect of the Navapatrika is the inclusion of plants such as pomegranate and arum, which originate in West Asia, and Aparajita or Clitoria tarnti that come from Indonesia. The geography invoked by the Navapatrika is larger than the Indian subcontinent, and these plants figure ancient trade routes that connect the subcontinent with the larger Indian Ocean world. The eminent Bengali Indologist and historian Haraprasad Shastri suggests that Durga Puja was originally an agricultural Navapatrika festival. Another eminent scholar, Amulya Charan Vidyabhushan, also argues that Durga Puja is an ancient autumnal festival, and the names of the goddess Amba and Umbika, the forms in which Durga is worshipped in western and southern India, are embodiments of the season autumn. However, the story of the Okal Bodhon does mark the conjugation of 2 key Vedic sacrificial rituals. Pancha Saradiya Yagya, or autumn sacrifice in honor of the goddess as Kanya, as daughter, marked by her embodiment as Kondo, or stem or root of trees, especially tubers, and Basantotsava, marked by the Vedangas as well as in localized festivals as celebration of the fertile mother goddess as flower, as the vernal Basanti. The great Bengali scholar Jogesh Chandra Rai Vidyanidhi, in his 1951 book Puja Parvan, suggests that the worship of Durga is an evolved form of the sacrificial ritual known as Rudra Yagya, or the sacrifice dedicated to the Rig Vedic deity Rudra, later understood as the fierce form of Shiva, where Durga embodied the sacrificial fire herself. The fire sacrifice typically occurred during the autumn, which was the beginning of the new year in the Vedic calendar. The goddess is situated upon the autumnal and vernal equinoxes, the seasonal cycles that mark the sun's movement towards winter and summer, respectively. These equinoxes also marked other cycles, such as that of harvest, of the start of warfare, of the resumption of oceanic trade, and crucially, the return of the daughter to her paternal home. The smarto scholars of Bengal, such as Bhabadev Bhatto, Srikar Datta, and most notably Raghunandan, associate the goddess Durga with multiple forms of liminality. Today, we mostly know that making the clay image of Durga needs earth from the prostitute quarters, which is shown in many movies. But actually, the making of Durga's clay image, which were not at all common before the late 18th century, actually needed 9 different types of earth, taken from a crossroad, an anthill, a riverbank, the shore of a sea, outside a prostitute's door, a temple, a palace, and, perhaps most interestingly, the dust on the horns of a bull and the hooves of a wild boar after they have dug up the ground. However, these Sanskrit scholars were not necessarily the ultimate authority on the worship of Durga. The medieval Mongol Kabya literature, especially Mukundaram's Chondi Mongol, incorporated many non-Brahminical, older narrative strands alongside the Sanskrit Puranic literature. Chondi Mongol presents numerous instances where Durga rebukes her husband Shiva for being poor, for having a disheveled household overrun with snakes and rats and peacocks and so on, and her mother, Menoka, announces that she would not send her daughter back again to a husband who cannot take care of his domestic duties. The historian Tithi Bhattacharya, in her essay Tracking the Goddess, points towards some of these instances. I would also recommend Kunal Chakraborty's book on the Puranas. In any case, these sentiments linger in the Agamoni and Bijaya songs of the goddess, which also are remarkable for portraying Durga as a daughter rather than as a mother. And we will end with one such song, Ebar Amar Uma Ele, this time when Uma comes home, which is uttered by Menoka, where she takes a vow to fight with her son-in-law Shiva to keep Durga home. Perhaps we are all familiar with the sentiment, as we feel Durga's stay to be inadequate each year, and we eagerly await for the next. Shubho Sharodiya everyone, have a great puja.